We are with Sally Bucksbaum Hunt. Am I saying that right? Do you like to say Bucksbaum or you say Bucksbaum?
Bucksbaum, but you can also just call me Sally Hunt. Bucksbaum is my maiden name.
Sure, it's a Facebook thing. I get it.
Yeah.
And you're not a movie star yet, so you don't have to. Right? Are you not a member of the Actors Equity, where you have to copyright your name? She's
Right.
just Sally B Hunt. It's cool. You gotta be Sally B Hunt,
Right.
like Johnny B Good. That's awesome. From St. Louis, Missouri. She is out there fighting the real fight. She is my hero. I don't, as most of you know, if you pay attention to what I do around here, I don't watch a lot. I just don't have time to be a YouTuber or someone who sees a lot of these videos and stuff. But someone sent me the video of you. I think originally the one where you were taking grief from this crappy old bald dude in some city council somewhere who was telling you you were crazy after
Right.
you made your point. So that's how we know who you are. You are, in my opinion, at the cutting edge of really what the global secular movement needs is this kind of input. So from St. Louis, Missouri, it's Sally Bucksbaum Hunt. Tell us how you got started fighting In God We Trust.
Yeah, well, I have always been an atheist my whole life. I was fortunate enough to be raised not being indoctrinated into any religion. And so I've always, strongly felt the discrimination and the judgment, the prejudice, the negativity from people when I admit that I'm an atheist, that I don't believe in a God. And I have always been passionate about the separation of church and state, because it's just completely wrong that there is this promotion of religion, of believing in a God in public schools and in government. And government is supposed to serve and represent all people regardless of religious beliefs or non-belief. So I've always been very passionate about that. Like, I feel, government and, public institutions need to be really, really respected, and just equality under the law and under government needs to be valued, and we should never be promoting that some people are superior to others, that some people are inferior simply because they don't believe in a God. And that is definitely what is being promoted by our government every single day. And so a lot of people know me as this separation of church and state advocate because of, first, I did a lot of activism for sex education in public schools. And, there was a fundamentalist Christian organization here in the St. Louis area called Thrive that was in a lot of public schools, teaching abstinence-only propaganda, fake sex ed propaganda. And so a lot of people knew me for that. We managed to get them out of 16 public school districts. They are unfortunately still in 4. But because of that, and people started knowing, that I am not afraid to publicly state that I'm an atheist and to publicly, do activism for the separation of church and state. What happened was a friend of mine who lives in Wentzville, Missouri, just not too far from where I live, sent me a picture of the new City Hall in Wentzville, which has very large letters, or very, very large display in the center of the dais of the City Hall that says, "In God We Trust." And so it was a Wentzville resident who is an atheist who knows that this display is wrong, but he was very afraid to speak out publicly himself. Wentzville is a very conservative, white, Christian fundamentalist area. And he didn't want to deal with the discrimination and backlash. But he knew that I was perfectly happy to speak out, and so I did so. And I attended a Wentzville Board of Aldermen meeting, and they knew who I was before I spoke. I had submitted online, and I stated that I wanted to speak, so they knew that I did not live in Wentzville. They knew that I was going to speak in opposition to this In God We Trust display, and they allowed me to speak, and it was no issue because they do allow non-residents to speak, just like residents. We have the same rights. And I spoke. I was polite. I was respectful. And what happened was the mayor cut me off early. Everyone is supposed to get 5 minutes to speak. He cut me off at 4 minutes and 35 seconds, and he lied and he said, "Your 5 minutes is up." And then he accused me of lying. He responded to me because I had said, that there are Wentzville residents that I had spoken to who are opposed to this display, but who are afraid to come forward for fear of hostility and resentment and discrimination and all of that. And I mentioned the one guy that I spoke to, but there were others. I spoke to a couple other Wentzville residents with who felt the same way and were afraid to speak publicly. But anyway, so the mayor accused me of lying. Basically, he said, "Well, let it be known that, you mentioned that there are Wentzville residents who are opposed to this display, but that's just hearsay," he said, "because they're not here tonight. And Wentzville residents never have an issue making their voices heard when they're opposed to something. So that's just hearsay." And I said, "Are you accusing me of lying? Because I just told you why they're not here tonight." And then he responded again and he said, "Well, nope, that's just hearsay. They would be here if they were really opposed to this display." And then I responded again, the same thing where I was just saying, "But I explained to you why they're not here." And then he said, "Okay, well, I'm going to have you taken out of this meeting." And I went to go sit back down. I did sit back down, and he had 2 police officers come and escort me out of the meeting, grab my arm, pull me out of this meeting. And the ACLU contacted me after they heard about this. It was on the news and everything. The ACLU has now filed a lawsuit against the city of Wentzville on my behalf.
That's outstanding. The ACLU, a great mention there, because they do take up the ball for atheist causes a lot, and they tend to get lost in the conversation here in the atheist movement, which we'll talk about that in a bit. But my observation over 4 or 5 years, looking at the national atheist orgs, people don't mention the ACLU, and they were probably doing it before anybody else was, and they're still doing it today. So that's awesome. That's how you got notorious enough to get on Fox.
Right, on Fox News. Yeah, but I do want to point out real quickly, though, that the ACLU's lawsuit that they filed for me, technically it wasn't about, being an atheist or about the Ingawi tree. Right. It was just about my free speech rights being violated. But it was clearly because of my viewpoint that happened. Right. Because I spoke about, that I am an atheist and I spoke against the Ingawi Trust.
The other thing that strikes me, and I ran up against this myself, is when you try to represent others as a leader in that sector, you get dismissed. Now, if you were a pastor who represented the concerns of his flock, they'd have given you all due respect and probably overtime.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Unless you were a snake handler or a Muslim. And I wonder how they'd feel if the Adhan was played over the loudspeakers in their town, like they put in "God We Trust." What if they played the Muslim call to prayer for those Muslim families in that town? I don't know. Wentz's, that's an awesome anachronism of a name. Wentz's, they sound old-fashioned and stuck in the mud just by their name. They should go back whence they came. In Wentz's, how big a town is that?
Oh gosh, that's a good question. I don't know.
You say it's a suburb though?
So Wentzville, it is. I mean, it's a lot bigger. Like, it's a growing. They are their own city. So basically, I live in a suburb of St. Louis. I live in Maryland Heights, and it's like urban sprawl. Like, more and more people are going out west. So close to where I live, west of where I live, there is St. Charles County. So Wentzville is in St. Charles County. I mean, they are their own city, and it's growing. And so, and it's about 25 minutes, maybe 30 minutes from where I live in Maryland Heights. So it's, maybe an hour from the city of St. Louis.
Okay.
But I don't have a number off the top of my head.
That's okay. I'm just trying to get a sense.
It's fairly big.
It's not a hick town.
No, I mean, it's definitely mostly white and mostly conservative, as I said, but it is not teeny tiny. It is there are a lot of businesses, a lot of big companies, big corporations, are there. So yeah, it's definitely not like rural as you would think of it. No.
It's largely.
And there are.
It's
Go ahead.
largely evangelical Christians driving this, not
Yeah.
Catholics, not.
Right. I mean, there are definitely Catholics. Like I would say, like the mayor is Catholic. And I feel like there's a lot of alignment sometimes, we're with Catholics and with the evangelical Christians. And it's the same thing. And there's another town right next to Wentzville called St. Peter's. They also have an "In God We Trust" sign, and I've also been going there and speaking. And their mayor is also Catholic. So that's why I feel like in, instead of like we don't even need to talk about like the various denominations of Christianity, because the display "In God We Trust" is about Christianity, and it's
Mhm.
always these legislators are always Christian in some denomination. They believe in Jesus. So I don't even, it doesn't, to me it doesn't matter which denomination, but it's Christianity that's in our laws. It's Christianity that is promoted by our government.
Speaking of which, how do you fight the fact that this really is a motto? This is a new sign in Wences?
In Wentzville, yeah,
Wentzville is a new sign?
it was a brand new city hall.
Okay.
Like in November, I think,
The,
is when it went up. Yeah.
the teacher in my kids' class put Bible verses up, which were so over the top that they weren't going to get excused by any court anywhere if it went to that. But the "In God We Trust" and the "God Bless America," the lawyers who came back said, well, look, "In God We Trust" is the national motto, whether we like it or not. That's a
Right.
fight that in general atheists, I think, we kind of stay away from it because it's sort of that one's kind of lost in a way, and I think most people approach it from a different angle. What is that problematic? The fact that how do you really get that removed when the fact is that they adopted that in the 50s and we should try to get it removed,
Right.
go back. How does that affect it?
Yeah, well, I mean, this is my argument here, is that just because something is legal doesn't make it right, doesn't make it ethical, and really does not make it constitutional. And we just need to continue saying that. This is absolutely unconstitutional. This is absolutely a promotion, endorsement, and advancement of religion by the government. And because what happens is if we just don't say anything and we just sit back and accept that this is our motto, and of course this display will go up because it's our national motto and it's legal, and then we just say absolutely nothing and we don't remind people that atheists exist, non-Christians exist. We are not ashamed. We are not apologetic. We just happen to not agree with their beliefs in a God for which there is no evidence, but just the point that like we are here and we are standing up for ourselves, that we are excluded from this statement, "In God We Trust." The statement is divisive, it is exclusionary, it is discriminatory. And so every single day we have our government telling us that there's something wrong with us if we are non-theists, atheists, if we are non-Christians, really, and that this is absolutely unacceptable because we are not inferior. We are not less worthy of rights and protection and representation from our government. It's our government too. And it's my argument about this is because people a lot of time they like to talk about, oh, well, the majority of people believe in God and the majority are Christians or whatever. But that's tyranny of the majority. And just because it's the majority believes in a God, that's not relevant to the government. They represent everyone, including the minorities, and government needs to promote equality and needs to remember that we all have the same rights and representation from the government. And so the fact that it's a majority believes in a guy has nothing to do with anything. Government doesn't get to promote that believing in a God is superior to not believing, because government needs to be secular, needs to remain neutral. And really, "In God We Trust" may as well say atheists are not welcome here. Like that's what this motto says. It was created for that reason, to promote that it's better to believe believe in a God than not to, that it is superior, that that's what makes you a good moral person, that's what makes you a patriot. I mean, it's all completely ridiculous, and it's discriminatory. It promotes discrimination. It promotes oppression, persecution by our government, and it sends this message that, like, know your place, that you cannot openly state that you're an atheist without being prepared to be discriminated against, whereas Christians, people who believe in a God, can publicly, openly talk about their beliefs, and it is welcome. And by the way, just before I forget, in Wentzville, after I was taken out by cops from that meeting that I just talked about, I just think this is important for people to know, is the woman who spoke after me, and there's video of this on YouTube as well. The woman who spoke after me got extra time after she talked in support of the display and against me. As she got up there and she spoke negatively about me, and then she spoke in support of their display of In God We Trust. And she did that for approximately 2 minutes or so. And then after that, the mayor gave her her full time, her full 5 minutes to speak after she had already talked about that. And so clearly, it just proves my entire point that this display, this motto, promotes that the government it has favoritism for one set of religious beliefs over another, and is promoting preferential treatment for those people and discrimination against atheists, against people who don't believe in a God, against non-Christians. So the mayor proved my point with that.
You're my new hero, right?
Oh, you are so sweet.
This is
Thank you.
unbelievable. What you're doing, honestly, is absolutely what needs to be done. You are not fighting this because they're breaking the law. You're fighting to change the law. You're doing what the grassroots movement needs to do. Not talk about the differences between us as atheists. Not quibble about this and that. We need to move forward on a civic issue that religious people should care about too. That's what they don't get. This is for their protection too. And I got into this, and they didn't get it on my piece on my little local news piece. But the Christians lose sight of the fact that as soon as they allow the government to sanction one form of Christianity, it opens the door to them turning the key on your version of Christianity, because all of that has been proven in the past, and a lot of people have learned the lesson on both sides. But separation of church and state is for the good of both, and churches are stronger when separation is stronger, and the state is stronger. So I can't even. I'm agog. I'm aghast. This woman is my new hero. How? What else do you do? Do you have local groups? Is this really where your fight goes? Do you have a job? Are you out there with? We all start local, atheist groups, secular groups, meetups, where people can sort of come, and most of them don't want to be seen. But activists like you and I, who are willing to have our name dragged through the mud by these people, are rare. What else do you do to organize, or if anything?
Yeah. Well, so I am a former school counselor, and right now I'm a stay-at-home mom. And so the timing has worked out where, I didn't have a job. Like when I first found out about that group Thrive that was in public schools teaching this terrible abstinence only, medically inaccurate, shame-based, fear-based propaganda. And so I have been a stay-at-home mom for a couple of years since leaving my school counseling job. And so I've been able, I didn't care. I didn't have anybody that could fire me. I didn't give a shit. So I just put it out there, and I started doing activism for sex ed. And then, with this whole In God We Trust, it just kind of happened where I found out about it, and it's just something visceral within me where I'm just, this is wrong. Not everybody believes in a God or trusts in a God, and we just need to speak up for what's right. And, I actually have been accepted into the counseling PhD program. So in the fall, I will be working on that, getting my PhD. I plan to go into private practice and do research in focusing on sex education But, and then I was thinking too, it would be really cool now that I'm, especially, I'm known as an atheist, separation of church and state activist and all of that, that it would also be really cool as a counselor to specialize in helping people recovering from religion, people who want to leave religion. Like, there's so many issues with that. And a lot of people are so full of shame, and their entire families and communities are shunning them. And it's a very common problem. And I definitely hope to be able to help those types of individuals as well. Yep. But yeah, my activism may have to take a little bit of a backseat in the fall when I'm in this PhD program, but we'll see. I'll do the best I can.
Paging Dr. Hunt.
Yeah. One day.
I feel so shitty about myself now.
Oh no.
I don't even put pants on for these podcasts. I'm trying to get the word out. People are getting their PhDs and leading revolutions. So no speaking tour. Do you plan to take this further as far as kind of get heard on purpose, or do you take it as it comes?
Yeah, I mean, if people like, I have been invited to various groups to speak, and I recently went and spoke at SEMO in University in Cape Girardeau, Missouri, over here at the Secular Student Alliance, and I spoke to them. I mean, yeah, if people, invite me, I'm happy to speak, and I love just helping to get the message out there and helping to inspire other atheists to speak up, as well as people who are not atheists, who believe in the separation of church and state and who see that it is what's right and it's about justice and equality. And I mean, yeah, the more people that are willing to speak up, the better. So anything I can do for that, like you mentioned how I was on Fox News and they invited me on, and I got there were a couple of people that criticized me for going on that horrible propaganda network. But at the same time, this message needs to get out there as much as possible. I'll talk about this anywhere.
Any publicity is good publicity, right?
Yeah, I think
that's exactly where I'm at on the micro level here in Milwaukee, and I got trashed for doing it on a lot of levels, and it was just worth it to get. You get set up as a bowling pin to get knocked down by these people, and a couple bloggers picked up the story and just made fun of me and made fun of our cause and in that style. And we have to be willing to take it just to get like you said, just to keep us in front of the public. If you'd have told me when I was young, and I'm older than you, when I was young, if you'd have told me that it would be cooler to be gay in 2017 than it would be to be openly secular, I'd have called you crazy. I mean, it's so fantastic what the LGBT movement's been able to do for themselves, but it's remarkable that it's more acceptable to be anything. Literally anything in America other than an atheist, and to the point where people don't even understand what that really means anymore. And I feel like my journey has led me to believe that this is a problem endemic to the education system in America, and people seem to think this is a Christian country, and I was never taught that. In New England, part of a Protestant church that was very liberal, not literal at all. Nobody told me Jesus was. Or nobody told me that the Garden of Eden was real. We all knew it was a metaphor, and we took it, you tried to do good by people, and it was just it wasn't any kind of hardcore Christianity, so it was easy to be an atheist and come out without being persecuted. But it turns out that the country's being lied to on a massive level by the teachers, in this country. So, if you're I don't really know what I'm getting at with this, but you have kids in the school system in Missouri. Did you come from the country, or have you always been in St. Louis? And what has that been like to raise young atheists in the Bible Belt? Tell us about that experience.
Yeah, I have 3 kids, 8, 7, and 5, and I really love being an openly atheist parent. My husband as well. This is the thing is. It's funny because before we had kids, we didn't know how we would address this topic. And we didn't bring it up initially until one day when my daughter asked us, well, what is this God that some people talk about? What does that even mean? And we had already, prior to that question, we had not talked about a belief in God or religion or whatever. We kind of had avoided the topic. And she was young, she was 3 at this point, but we had avoided it. But we had, of course, talked about science, and we had talked about a value of scientific evidence and just understanding that, being a critical thinker and just loving scientific research and evidence and understanding it. So when she asked us that, and then we talked about, well, some people believe that, we just kind of like what people think about God. And some people believe that there's this thing called God that created the universe and that created people. And some people believe, and she thought that was so silly because we hadn't told her that this is true. So she's like, really? She's like, and it was funny because I remember I said, some people think that God is this thing that created all people. And she was like, but cells create people. Like, I remember she said that at that age, and it was really cute, just because from her, she already had this foundation of science, so it made no sense. And that's the thing. I feel like we don't have to, it's not about telling kids what to think or what to believe, but it's like it's telling kids how to think and how to value evidence and how to be a critical thinker and all of that. And I feel like then they on their own then will naturally be atheists. Like I never, it was never about telling our kids to be atheists or telling our kids to not believe in a God. It's like, that's the thing is, so then I remember then she was asking about this, and then my husband and I said, well, when she eventually asked, like, what do you think, or do you believe in this? And we said, no, well, we don't believe in this, but some people do, and we respect all people, and it's just not that big of a deal. But, and I will say since then, and all three of our kids now bigger and older and understanding all of this, and it's very rewarding as a parent to see as your kids are these critical thinkers and they get it. I feel like it's really important for kids to understand also like what they're up against in society, like for them to know the unfortunate reality that most people, first of all, they need to know the reality that most people are not open atheists and that a lot of people do judge us, but that's okay. Like, that's not about us. Don't feel shame or embarrassment. It is what it is. But just that they need to know that is going to be out there and that's going to be something that we're up against. But then also for them to know the very, very sad reality that there are a lot of people who don't value science and who deny science. And I think that is important. And that's what has been awesome, is like for our kids to know that. So when they have been confronted with that, like they get it, they know the problems of that mindset, and they can attack it. And like my kids have just really impressed me. Like they completely get it as young as they are. And I will say as I said, I was lucky to not be raised indoctrinated into any religion. And I'm very thankful for that. But I will say that my parents had not prepared me for like what we're up against, this like fundamentalist anti-science crap.
Well, it's gone retro. They couldn't have known how retro it's gone with the conservative backlash.
Right.
And I, from my viewpoint, it's the death throes of religion that we're seeing. It's seriously, like, you are in my head. Where have you been? I did the same thing with my kids, and the right was taken away from me by the kindergarten teacher when she taught my son a prayer put to music, and that's what got me going. I tried to I didn't indoctrinate them to atheism. We just didn't talk about it, and I wanted to see how long they would go without their classmates or the kids in school sort of, opening the door on it. And I figured it would happen but not by the public school teachers. We have the right to expect that doesn't happen at the hands of the public school teacher. And so that's what got me going on it. So you're exactly right. And if I feel like, and it sounds like you agree with me, I always argue with people, if early man had been handed the scientific knowledge of today and the philosophical knowledge of today, the God concept would have never come up. So even people who have that vague God concept where they would not even be able to go there in their minds if it weren't for some form of indoctrination. Because people try to argue with me that all religion is not indoctrination, and it clearly is at this point. There's no reason for it to continue to exist. It used to be science and it used to be philosophy. Both of those sciences have rejected religion, so it's only people who you need to use it as a personal faith crutch who cling to it, and that's fine. But keep it out of my school. Yeah, keep it out of my school.
That's the thing. It's just like, it's a personal belief, and I talk about this at these meetings at City Hall, about In God We Trust. Like, it's not about, I don't get up there and I don't say anything negative about people who believe in a God or Christians, because it's not about that. I just think we have to recognize what it is. It's a belief. People have the right to believe whatever they want. Like, a person can believe, in the tooth fairy, in leprechauns, and big, but it's like, and people have their full rights to go to any church or house of worship and to read any religious text, any holy book that they want, and they have their full freedoms and their full rights. We can't pretend as though there's evidence for these beliefs. And that's when I will confront and challenge someone, is when they claim that this is definitely true and that there's evidence. I mean, there's just not, and that's not mean to say. It's just a fact. There's zero evidence. And it's like, okay, well, that being said, you have the right to believe whatever you want. But when it comes to the In God We Trust motto and display, it's not about your beliefs, but this is about government. And like how you're talking about, like with public schools, I mean, yeah, it's about the government. It's about public schools. It's about our taxpayer funded institutions, and they need to be about evidence, and they need to be about equality, and religion is completely separate, and everybody has the right to believe in anything in their homes and in their churches and in their head. But that's not what this is about here.
You are in St. Louis. I'm outside of Chicago. Can we meet in Peoria and like beat up some small town religious people or something? Can we do a little presentation somewhere?
Oh, that'd be great.
Do you have a concerted plan, or you just kind of let these things come at you and fight it where you can, or do you have like an agenda going forward?
No, I mean, there's really no specific agenda except just to continue speaking,
up for what's right, speaking up for equality and for the separation of church and state, and for normalizing atheism, destigmatizing atheism. I think that's definitely part of it, but it's really just speaking up for it and trying to get this message out there as much as possible, and hopefully encouraging and inspiring others to do the same. But I mean, anyone, like I said, I think anyone who's willing to listen, I am always happy to get out there and speak about this.
Now, are you a city girl your whole life, or did you move into St. Louis from outside?
I've lived here my whole life.
Is that easier, do you think, than somebody in tiny town Missouri?
Oh, I mean, definitely. I've heard some horrible stories, and I have experienced it as well. I used to work as a counselor in Troy, Missouri, and so I kind of have firsthand experience of how narrow-minded and just the Christian supremacy, small town kind of mentality, predominantly white, predominantly Christian, and conservative, Republican, and so much Christian supremacy, so much, just the assumption that everyone is Christian, absolutely entitlement, so much Christian privilege. I mean, they just assume everybody's Christian, and they just openly talk about, and this was in a public school that I worked in, they would openly talk about how they go to church. They openly talk about praying, openly talk about how the problem with kids when they have issues is that they don't go to church and that they're not Christian, and just this open prejudice and hostility against anyone who's not Christian. It's just completely acceptable.
They have this assumption that how could anyone be against it? It's just so great for them that
right.
How could it be bad in any way, and how could anybody be against it? Look how great it is for us. And I'm always amazed that the people who want to double down on it when it's not working. We have the most religious industrialized nation by far, and we have the most school shootings. How does more Jesus help?
Right.
How does more Jesus help that problem?
Oh yeah. I talk about that a lot. Like, I know there's a list of the world's, the ranking of like the happiest countries, and based on a lot of surveys, and like the top 4 happiest nations rank also in like the least religious. It's like Denmark, Finland.
It's pretty obvious. It's really pretty obvious. Yeah,
Right.
Sweden, Norway, Denmark,
Right.
Holland,
Right.
all
And
of
it's
the
like,
Belgium. They're all ecstatic.
And it's like not only are they happiest, but they are healthiest.
Yes,
And they
quality
are
of life,
safest, as you said.
longest
yeah,
lived.
like the crime is not not a problem.
Yep.
Exactly. Like they are doing so much better than the U.S. Like
Mm-hmm.
by every metric, and so it's
it's
we
remarkable.
definitely need to wake up.
All right. Well, we're about out of battery again. What do you think? One more before I let you go. I think I wanted to know what you think of the movement. It seems like you do what you do on horseback like a shining knight. Honestly, this woman, I'm falling in love here. I'm sorry that you're married to me. You're amazing, and I can't wait to talk to you more about this whole thing. What is your observation of the movement in general? Do we have this problem with sexual assault charges against leaders in the atheist movement? Do you pay any attention to that, to the national orgs? Is it just kind of a circus? Tell me about that.
Yeah. We need to, I will say, the atheist movement, first of all, we need to focus on the separation of church and state and actually making that happen. We need to focus on the groundwork, like going to meetings, speaking up. I feel like it needs to be like action oriented, inspiring people to speak up and to get the job done. But so aside from that, we in the atheist movement need to lift up voices of women and people of color. I think that it has been a predominantly white male movement. And I think I have seen a lot of misogyny. I have seen a lot of racism and xenophobia. And, the thing is, being an atheist, just being atheist doesn't mean that we all share the same political views or views about anything other than we just don't accept the claim that a God exists. So it doesn't mean that we're always going to agree on everything else. But it's interesting because the atheists that I have met who have right-wing views about some things and have misogynistic and racist views and don't actually care about fighting for social, economic, and racial justice, and they don't care about actually fighting for equality for all under the law, those people are really enablers and apologists for Christian theocracy and Christian supremacy. I mean, you can't support right-wing politicians and policies without, you have to admit that when you do that, you are supporting the people who are promoting Christian theocracy, right? Yeah, right now. Like it's the Republicans. It's the right wing. There's no way around that. But so, I mean, there's that. But just plus what they do is they hurt the movement. The people with the misogynists, the rape apologists, the anti-feminists, the people who promote racism, who speak out against the oppressed, marginalized people, women and people of color, who are simply advocating for their rights, like people who are scared of those conversations, they are hurting the entire movement, because those conversations are necessary and they're 100% in line with what we as atheists are doing, because we atheists who fight against Christian supremacy and Christian theocracy, which is oppression against us as atheists, it's the same idea as we fight against white supremacy and racism and harm against minorities, people of color, and same thing against patriarchy and what women deal with. I mean, it's all the same idea. Like, there are these overarching systemic problems, and we can't pretend as though we only care about one and we don't care about others. I'm just kind of fed up with people who are uncomfortable with these conversations. I mean, if you are, then you're hurting the entire movement.
You're part of the problem. Yeah.
You're exactly part of the problem. And when it comes to, like how you said, like the rape and sexual assault from leaders in the atheist movement, I mean, like with David Silverman most recently, with American Atheists, they did the exact right thing. Good for them. There were several credible allegations against him. And they had a thorough investigation, and they all voted. Like, this was not one person making this decision. People need to understand, like, there was like 15 board members who voted to remove his title as president or to fire him. They did the exact right thing. Like, they cannot allow someone to abuse their power and hurt people. That hurts the entire movement. So I was really, really happy that they made that decision. We can't tolerate that.
Well said, Sally Hunt. Thank you for being with us. It's the Atheist Underground podcast. It gets edited with several other pieces to it. It's not just the interview, so it might take a week or two. And I'll send you a link that you can listen to this. And,
okay.
Honestly, thank you for what you're doing. It's remarkable to me, and I don't watch a lot of stuff, but we're going to make sure that we share your stuff, and because
awesome.
I believe that this is where the fight needs to be, and everything you've said has been on point, and it's like there's nothing you can argue with. Sally Hunt is where it's at. People, check us out. Do you have a website, a Facebook page you want to plug? You have anything like that? A book you've written?
Yeah.
A movie coming out? What's up?
That would be cool. Yeah. No. So my Facebook page is, I call myself the Passionate Atheist. And so facebook.com/Passionate Atheist. You can find me there. I'm happy to connect with people on my personal Facebook page as well. Maybe send me a message. But Sally Buxbaum Hunt, Buxbaum Hunt, and you can find me there. My YouTube channel is youtube.com/Sally Hunt Atheist. And just my name, Sally Hunt, is my YouTube channel as well. And I'm Twitter, Sally B. Hunt, and Instagram.
You do have
Sally
a Twitter.
B.
I was going to ask.
So.
I couldn't find you.
Yeah.
I'll find you on Twitter as well. And
yep.
yeah, I think that's it. Thanks again, and I'll stay in touch. Really great stuff.
Okay.
All right. Take it easy.
You.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Thank you. All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Welcome to the underground.